Time, Nina Corwin. Say hi, Nina.
Hey there. Oh, where it says Bill Harrison, that's not Bill Harrison. That's Nina Corwin handling uh in an inadequate way, probably the technology. I was not born for technology, but here we are, keeping things going, Al and I, for whatever, 25 some years, and happy to be here. On Zoom with people from all over the country, with our featured readers, Naomi Cohn and Gary McDowell. Thank you guys for joining us tonight.
So,
I'm thinking that I'm just going to be so worried about doing tech stuff that I'm not going to read a poem tonight. I'm going to let Al get us started with the poem, and then we'll be into the open mic.
so I just made a quick decision that it is December, and instead of reading something new, I'm going to read a solstice poem. Just one of my personal favorites, actually, of my own. I guess it's okay to have a personal favorite of your own. Um, I was going to read something new, but I think this one will do better. It's called Celebrating Solstice. Holding opposite ends of a string of Christmas lights, we parade around the fir tree, transplanted into our living room for this month of Santas and snowmen and red ribbons. Something deliciously pagan, so primal. Where are the bonfires, the drums, women shimmying in flickering shadows? We toast and sing to birth in the cold air of a dying season, the dark solstice, so like the hunter facing a wolf, something deliciously alive in the taste of death, deliciously arousing in our Christmas lights tug of war across our selfish flames, the balancing of air and earth, fire and ice, our ritual dance of kiss and bite. So, so thank you. Thank you. Um, so that starts us out tonight. So nobody else had to be first. And we go in random order in the open mic. So who shall start? I think Pablo out of Pablo. I think you can be our opener.
Thank you so much. Happy to see you all. I'm going to start with Caravaggio, Michelangelo Merisi de Caravaggio. Cutthroat villain, body carved in light, cut through a valley of darkness. The gods and us and saints, sickly and angry, and Christ himself a body. Vagrant your thoughts and vagrant your talents, ripe as the fruit on the table, caught, about to decay. Musicians and a fly on a melon, a dry flower and a golden light. Caravaggio castrated Tomasoni with his sword before deliberately killing him. Unless I see the marks of the nails in his hands, I will not believe it. Dimly lit rooms, his face disfigured after the night he attacked in Malta. A saint beheaded. He had a fever on the day he died. Cut through for Tomasoni in an alley in Naples. The announcement from Rome is that you died of a fever and not in an alley, not for love. Thank you. And this is detention. On Christmas Eve, Felipe Alonso Gomez had a fever and died on his way back to the hospital. He traveled 2,000 miles only to spend his final days in one cell or another. 8 years old on Christmas Eve, Felipe Alonso Gomez, with a fever of 103, was released back into custody. And the Lord said, I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me. Thank you.
Pablo, thank you so much. It's been great to have you here as a regular. Let's move on. And Robbie Nestor, you ready? Robbie, who just had a book accepted or is about to have a book come out, and we'll probably hear more about it before uh, too many months. Hence, what month does it come out?
I don't know yet. It was just accepted last week.
Right.
It's an ekphrastic manuscript called About to Disappear. And I don't know when it's going to appear.
All
But
right,
she said she's going to start working on it in 3 months.
great,
So I think it's pretty much ready to go, and I already have all my blurbers signed up. So I
great.
think it will be pretty, and it's got no images, so it's going to be uncomplicated to work on.
All right, so let's.
Okay, so would you rather have food or poem about Philadelphia? Preference? No? You're on mute.
Do we
So
have time for both, Robbie?
okay, but I have three here. So I'll read the one about Philadelphia and the one about California. Traces. It's been 2 decades since I've been in my old neighborhood, once the haunt of Jewish families not quite middle class. They built a quasi-suburban enclave with schools and shops and synagogues, a library, public transportation, even its own newspaper. When we moved in, the ground was raw, unplanted. I remember stores opening on Castor Avenue, the Gingham House, where everybody's mom schmoozed with groups of friends, the delis and the kosher bakeries, 2 movie theaters, gone. The last time I was there to empty out my parents' house and sell it. Was I still the child netting fireflies in the high grass, riding my bike around the block? I didn't recognize any of the people. Where was Mr. Moskowitz, the blind man with his guide dog, the kind librarian, the trolley shooting sparks as it jolted down the track? Gutted. In their place, empty storefronts, overflowing garbage cans. Explorer. In 1980, I came to California as a transplant, stunned by the brightness, spiky palm trees, brown hills. It surprised me that everything came from somewhere else, like me, exotic backdrop to some movie set I could not identify. Busloads of gawking tourists, squawking parrots, escapees in motley flocks, picking dark fruits from the olive trees, bright lemons. So much to see, the blue of sky and sea, white line of beach offering an opportunity to fill each space with words, to take root in the arid soil and grow, set seed among orange groves, twisted eucalyptus. The desert, which reminded me of an abandoned parking lot with its tumbleweed and Joshua trees, starved moon. But California had another face, a place of redwood and sequoia. Standing in their damp half light, I became a child again, distracted by the distant sky's bright mirror, the sun's familiar face. Now I've settled in, my explorations mostly limited to plate and page. I'm still trying new ideas, cuisines, sniffing spices at the farmer's market, taking on a shape I didn't have before. Thanks. I always love being here.
Well, thank you, Robbie. We enjoy when you're here. There's Nina. Next up, Let's have John Simmons from all the way from Hawaii.
Hi, thank you. Thank you very much, Al and Nina, and hope Bill is doing okay. And yeah, this is John Simons from Honolulu. This is a poem called Helter Shelter. Helter Shelter. Our roofs and walls have become our foundation. They're shielding more vital to us than past beliefs, grounding support as we build or seek refuge from threats of the moment, sleeping on fears of tomorrow. People fleeing explosive lands, taking cover as they find it, may not think of how they'll last or care what lies below the floor they've come to occupy for now. Cyber kings and movie stars rushing to expensive lands mostly want space that separates with gates their hidden island castles from their distant neighbors. Basements seem missing from building plans, left out from under concrete slabs, ceiling platforms over journeys, launching private paths ahead. Small town others worry where they build or buy their homes. Will there ever be grassy space for all to landscape family pleasures? Who wouldn't like a cool place beside tall trees at shadow time? Lenders and insurers hold answers in their careful cards and shifting numbers, having more to say than gardeners and growers on rooting adjacent greens, seeing trees too close as liabilities, hostile spears of changing nature, weaponized boughs in falling flight, urging clips to hinge roofs and boards against next season's hurricanes. Would you plant your palace in the woods with towering branches as neighbors? A dog and rifle your main trusted guests? Or instead choose the nearness of humans, dwellers a yard path door knock away, on both sides and behind the back hedge? High-rise creators rarely get lost in the trees on their way to the bank, where plans to build upward and quickly find welcome home for erecting grand towers for owners from elsewhere to buy and rent out for luxury earnings. Promised affordable units con cities into permitting tall plans, ignoring second-class side entrance status that goes with the cut-rate apartments. Out of the picture and hoping are those by the side of the road, on foundations of sidewalks and parks, with roofs and walls of canvas or plastic, shopping carts storing or moving to the next location they can find to play out the clock, marking time on their miracle dreams. Where people live outweighs how they live, as the days teach us homes not so much where the heart is, but where walls can resist the approach of an overgrown world. Thank you.
All right, thanks, John. And next, how about an old friend of ours, Shelley Nation, coming to us from Oklahoma.
Hey there. Good to see you. I hope Bill's okay.
Thanks.
Um, I'm going to read an old poem. This in my chapbook, 10 Hours to Tulsa. This is called Uncle Harry. Yeah, it's 65. I still bleach my hair, wear a large cowboy hat on my head, giant belt buckle around my waist, and a chewed up toothpick between my lips. First wife, Donna, came a lesbian, lives with Ruth in the double wide down the street. First child, Dina's got the schizophrenia, keeps going off her meds to have my grandkids. Last time she smashed the bathroom mirror, cut herself up real bad, trying to keep herself from someone safe from someone living in her head. Second kid's Randy, worked a spell as a roadie with Dwight Yoakam till the heroin cocaine got to be too much. Now he's settling down with some chick he met 10 years older than him. Got 2 little ones. Guess he's a daddy now, too. Dad died a few years back. Yeah, he's in a better place and all. Now away from that crazy old wife of his, kept him drinking all those years, hiding flasks all around the whole damn trailer. Maybe it'll be a little easier finding myself a new lady. Don't have to be worrying about him pinching their asses every time I bring a new one around. But me, well, always have been a ladies' man. Guess I do get that from the old man. Finally did get hitched again about 30 years ago or so. Second wife, Deb, blonde hair, black roots, 6 kids, all of them kind of hazy with Mary Jane smells filling up the entire double wide. Not a one of them had an inch of inclination to do nothing, spending all my money, smoking up my weed, drinking all my booze, and Deb thinking all the while it's okay, came from her little babies. Least they ain't killing no one, she says. Well, I got tired of that shit after 20 years, threw her out with the entire crew of her babies, grandbabies, had a whole zoo living with me. Now I just hang around, dating here and there, being my old man, doing my own thing. I get along nicely by myself. Well, it's time for me to move on. Got a few more stops to make before I got to put this here truck to bed. Don't be a stranger. Always have enough beer in the fridge to share with a neighbor. Um, I'm going to try something. I've read this a few times without losing it, so I'm going to try it. A good friend of mine just passed 2 months ago, and I was able a couple weeks ago to write a poem for him. I just want to say on the front end that Kelly called his home his teepee. He had a small teepee in front of his home, like the skeleton of one. He was half Cherokee and half Kiowa. So that was his dream to build his own. So that's what his home was called. If you were here now, whole with no pain, you would be in your teepee, plaid house pants, t-shirt, oversized gray sweater that belonged to your grandfather, barefoot. Hot coffee dripping, hunched over your drawing pad, at your table, concocted as a desk, glass perched over the bridge of your nose, hand crafting delicate lines, an entire universe coming to. As a god, you would create life while I watch creation form, energy dancing on paper, your intent obvious. The coffee brewed, you would set the wand down, the new life taking a rest from being born, and pour us both a cup, then sit across from me in the dark room, lit by the lamp hovering over your creation, their sun. We would talk for an hour, sipping coffee, discussing ideas, current events, music, philosophy, history. After the last sip, I would slip on my shoes, wrap my arms around your neck, and put a kiss upon your lips. I would go home to create new lives with my words under a sun positioned upon a table you created as you remain trying to figure out how to balance creation. Thank you.
Thank you, Shelley. you got through it. It's a nice poem. Let's see. Bob Chacoin, you haven't been here in a long time. What do you got?
Been too long. Been too long. I got usual couple minutes of short shorts. Remember the song? Who wears short shorts? We wear short shorts from the 50s. Post-election Basho. Frog splash into the pond, not a swamp, to escape the new DOJ. The first earthworm to surface in early spring opens your window, a crack no wider than itself, then climbs back to the thawed ground so that you and it can enjoy the year's first rain together. The 5:15. The first train of the morning honks to the last train from the night before, though hours have passed between them that you, my untroubled, slept clear through. Both running fevers, we turn away from each other in bed to warm the opposite ends of the universe. Chicxulub. If the earth still remembers taking the great meteor into it, the thud and deafening even before there were ears and the sifting down peace afterwards, then I can remember my time with you. Was it 66 million years? And you can remember mine with yours. Since the girl is too grown up now for me to read to her before dreamland, at night I put myself to rest with the curled up cats and combs and mush in the upstairs room of goodnight moon until I am dead to the world. When my low regular snore across the hall and through two doors ajar puts my daughter asleep too. In old age, I dream of going back to high school again to plow through puberty and fend off bullies and develop a first crush, then a second crush, and be a bench player on the team, and for all the self-doubt and the angst, but mostly just to have you sign my yearbook. Since I've gotten old, the new thing I learn each day is the thing I forgot overnight. After you are done with making that good trouble, be happy for a spell, then go and find yourself some good grief, as Robert Bly might have found with Charlie Brown. I'm still charmed to this day by the Hindu belief in eternal recurrence, but I never did think it meant a second Trump presidency. Antarctica. The ice shelf collapsing into the sea has always wished it might be for one night that lasts 6 months, Juliet of Verona's balcony. The deer in my headlights gazes calmly as a Buddha, aware that my car can only go about 1 mile an hour, and will not obliterate her, but nudge her gently aside and so back into her woods. Finally, wrath of God. An old poet is like a piranha fish telling the young who love the quick kill how it was back when a conquistador wearing armor fell into the Amazon River. Thank you, everyone.
There was something I was going to say about that, Bob, but I don't think I can say it articulately, but I'll tell you. The next person, how about we have Carolyn Wellman? Carolyn has won a couple of prizes with After Hours. And we're always glad to have you here.
You're muted, Carolyn.
Okay. Hi. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. It's always great to be here. So this poem is about a guy I've been thinking about this guy a lot the last month or so. And I've tried several times to write about him, and this is my latest effort. This is called A Rose for Robert Desnos. And the subtitle is Poet and Journalist, 1900 to 1945. Who will we become in this new wilderness? Will we carry resistance everywhere, our courage in full blossom? In Terezin, he shared his broth and bread. In the shadows of the crematorium, he opened other men's hands, their fingers like petals, as he declared to each, "You will have a long life, many children," the guards standing near, astounded. After liberation, he held a white flower for days on end, the gift of someone who recognized his name, asking, "Are you the poet?" His assent barely a whisper, so close to death. Now his poems rise from the page, sparking like fire, striking like lightning. His voice thunders across the years, across the void, calling to those lost in the fields, lost in the world, calling from beyond the grave, because we still need him. That last part is a reference to, he has a poem called The Voice of Robert Desnos, and it's the most amazing experience to read that, because the voice is so strong, and it just, it just cuts through everything and comes to us. This next one is a little lighter. So I work for the Postal Service, and whenever anyone in any of the little towns nearby calls in sick or goes on vacation, then somebody has to be sent, right, to take their place, because, you can't just close a post office down. So that's been one of the things I've had to do the last few months, and recently that brought back some memories driving there. So that's where this poem came from. And this is called In Late October. The night we met, I made him chase me around hotel sidewalks, up and down stairs, hiding and running, calling out. When he caught me, I found myself afraid of his desire, his shoulder my refuge after the first few kisses, his laughter gentle, his voice a soft blanket. By morning, the weather had turned, my clothes too light, so he gave me his jacket and stood there behind me all morning, hands atop mine in the pockets. Then it was time to go to our team buses. His letter arrived a week later, black cursive scrawled on hotel stationery, his senior picture signed, "Stay sweet." Now the first frost lies on the fields, and I remember how we just stayed in the shallows, for he knew I feared the currents and the undertow, how he held me there in the first stirrings of whatever love was and is. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Very nice, Caroline. It's always amazing how deep that well of memory is for poems. Let's see who shall go next. We keep doing boy, girl, boy, girl. So let's keep going. Kevin Shine, it's up to you.
All right. Well, thanks, Al. And thanks, everyone. I have really been enjoying tonight's poems. Really good stuff. So I'll be reading two poems tonight. Both of them were inspired by experiences while I was in high school. High school has been very much on my mind lately because of the death of a dear friend at age 93. She was my high school English teacher in my senior year. Afterwards, we stayed in touch, and she became a huge inspiration and encourager of my writing. So I'll get started tonight with a poem about running in a high school cross-country meet. The title is Second Wind. Stripped of varsity colors, Harriers in high school heraldry, singlets and shorts, the garb of the fleet, nerves kept in check at a regional meet, boxed in by the pack, aching to run, released by a crack shot from the starter's gun. Weaving grim-faced, darting through gaps, who calls this a sport? Panting like prey on a cross-country course. Worse than a fever, everything hurts, with too little breath to spit out a curse. Chatter from coaches, gruff and laconic. You're one heave away from tasting the vomit. Guts turning over, as nauseous as could be, when a second wind whisper, you're right where you should be. With the finish in sight, nothing's the same. The hairs hit the wall. Kicking too soon puts them to shame. While you chase the spent, reeling them in, one at a time, pushing ahead to the front of the line. Who calls this a sport? Puking and lame. A diversion for gods who lounge at their ease, while mortals pursue an impossible game of time and of distance, endurance and speed. Thank you. My second poem was inspired by the triumph of lighting a campfire in Boy Scouts with flint and steel. And I'm going to call it Prometheus. A troop of scouts in need of warmth and light struck flint and steel in hopes they might incite a ferrous nick to spray a hail of white-hot metal chips. Softly blown, an ember reddens in a tinder nest. A curl of smoke, an orange tongue come flickering to life, devouring shavings from a Boy Scout knife. The fire feeds on twigs and sticks, dried limbs, a mix of scavenged cordwood, hatchet split. Then come songs and stories as coals burn down to ash to earn a merit badge that only gods and scouts wear upon their sash. Thanks everyone for listening.
All right then. Thank you for that. And I think next, let's have Mimi Rosenbush. Mimi, nice to see you tonight.
Nice to see you. Thank you so much. I'm going to read two poems. The first one is called Poetry Forgotten. Social media staring without awareness. I forget I'm alive, not numb. A person who breathes, loves, cares, but the caring part swallows me, whole, wasting, empty. I'm breathing without air and realize I forgot to write a poem. Today and yesterday, I forgot the joy of it, the turn of phrase, the assembly of words, the satisfaction from cracking meaning open, poetry forgotten. I forgot to miss writing poems, words erased empty without matter. It doesn't matter, not for me. Writing doesn't matter except my journal, where today and yesterday, a page stabbed with sentences staccato in resignation, absolute and final, break the silence. And here I write this poem, exhausted, crying out for tomorrow, from days deadened to song and sound. The second poem I'm going to read is called The Balagan. A balagan is Hebrew for a chaotic mess. So the balagan after October 7, 2023. This mess of mediocrity, this balagan of things so important that they must be done, but can't get done because of inertia or ineptitude or sadness, are all combined in shutdown, full stop shutdown. Call it shock consciousness or unconsciousness. Walk around like you're here, but not here at all. One does as one does, but one doesn't. Asleep instantly. Up 3 hours later, still night. Check phone. Sleep maybe 2, 3 hours. Again, wake at dawn. Restlessly watching. I don't recognize myself. Only conjugation makes sense. Shock, shocking, shocked. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mimi. Next up, Virginia Bell, who we got to hang out a little bit recently up at a Write-On conference, and Virginia was part of a panel at that conference. So thank you for that, and welcome, Virginia.
Hey guys, it's good to see folks. There's some folks in the room I haven't seen in years. So I'm sorry I can't make it more often, but it's really nice to be here. I'm still thinking about Mimi's last line that, what was it? Some things can only be said in conjugation.
Mm.
Yeah. And Pablo just quoted it in the chat, conjugation. Thanks for that. If you'll permit me just a half second of self-promotion, I'm going to read this one poem that's in a book that's about to come out next month from Glass Lyre Press. And this poem was published last year in the online journal Swim, SWIMM. Oh, Mother. Atavistic, angel, boss, cipher, dancer, dishwasher, enemy, friend, girl, harridan, from French, haridel, meaning old, useless horse. Harpy, a contronym or Janus word, both nominal and adjectival, hymn and harangue. Interlocutor, investor, janitor, juggernaut. From Hindi, Jagannath, meaning Lord of the world. Keeper of keys, keeper of candy, of keepsakes, of keening, keen, both sharp and sensitive, smart and smarting. Lamb, lion, married once, me, mine, money lender, myth, nothing, no one, nobody. Orbiting each of our suns, planetary, plaintiff, queen, of course, inquisitive, inquisitioner, resentful, single now, single-minded, tedious, tautological, unappreciated understudy, violated, vanquished, virgin and vamp, washer of windows and screens. Remember how she taught you to pop them out, hose them down, the gray water spilling out like a polluted waterfall, then pop them back in to finally clear the air. Widow, ex, yours, you. Why not zany more often? A rare and wonderful sight, hips in carefree sachet that laugh, goofy, throwing her arms in the air, gold bangles crashing like tiny symbols of joy. Zealous, zealot, zero, on her down days, sliding into loneliness and its slippery rooms. Zilch, meaning an insignificant person, or the name of a comic character invented in the magazine Ballyhoo in 1931, one Mr. Joe Zilch. In other words, not real, not original, maybe not even true. Thanks for hosting this great series, you two.
Thank you. And
Thank you, Virginia.
I didn't know that about Zilch. That's a Joe Bitful right? The Jinx guy from Lil Abner.
I looked it up. Sounds right. I'm not really the expert I'm pretending to be.
Al, you want to do the interlude and the advertising and all of that?
Our interlude. Well, we always we used to pass a hat before we went virtual, and we like to pass a hat for our featured readers. So I'll put a link into the chat. So you know, give if you can. We like to say thank you to our features, and so that's how we do it. It's pretty simple. The link looks like an after hours press link, but the money goes to our features.
Also, there are theoretically links for the websites or the publishers or something like that of our features tonight. And Al, are they in the YouTube chat as well?
They will be.
Oh, great. So stay tuned. The best gift you can give a poet is to read their poetry. That's what I think, anyway. And just a heads up for next month, the second Monday of the month, as we always schedule it, we have Rachel Robbins, and we also have the California Poet Laureate, that's Lee Herrick. So I hope you will join us then. And now we are going to go to our two features, Naomi Cohn and Gary McDowell. The publishers of Rose Metal Press contacted me a few months ago and said, we have this person, Naomi Cohn, and she's going to be, we have published one of her books. It's going to be coming out shortly. And somehow that tumbled into a twofer of Rose Metal writers. And so we have also with us Gary McDowell. So we're going to be hearing from both of them. And in the discussion that we have afterwards, one question I'm going to have for you is to tell us about Rose Metal Press a little bit, but I think the quickest thing I can say about it is they publish hybrid work. Is that a good snippet? Okay, so I am going to start with Naomi Cohn is going to start for us, and she's the author of the Braille Encyclopedia, Brief Essays on Altered Sites, and it just came out this year. The book examines vision loss and relearning to read and write as an adult. A 2023 McKnight Artist Fellow in Writing. Her previous publications include a chapbook, Between Nectar and Eternity, which is a great title. And her works also appeared or is forthcoming in the AWP Chronicle, Baltimore Review, Fourth River Hippocampus, Ninth Letter and Poetry, among other places. She's also appeared on NPR and been honored by a Best of the Net finalist and two Pushcart nominations. She has been raised in Chicago, and she now lives on unceded Dakota territory in St. Paul, Michigan, Minnesota. Naomi, thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you so much, Nina and Al. Did I successfully get my mic on?
Yep.
Good. And yeah, this is such a wonderful, thanks for this series and also all the other things you guys do to make the creative ecosystem work. So much appreciated. And really, I've really loved listening to all of your words. So thank you for that. So the Braille Encyclopedia started as an essay, and then it became a collection of linked prose poems, which is how Rose Medal accepted it. And then I got into some trouble between 2020 when they accepted it and 2024 when we published it and started writing prose. And so I started adding all these sort of more creative nonfiction things to it. But I am, this is the kind of press they are. They're like, oh, sure, we'll do that. We'll make this thing that's a mess of prose poems and little flash essays. That sounds great. So, but tonight I'm looking forward to kind of reading some of the things that honor its more poetry roots. So I'm going to start with a piece called kindness. So one of the things, it's a very fictional sort of encyclopedia that I've written. It was more of a scaffold as a way of organizing my these little pieces I was writing. But I guess now after the fact, I think of it as, well, encyclopedias are, they always sort of include definitions. And so we're really exploring, what do things mean to us? And so this piece, kindness, is kind of about bumping into what blindness means to other people. Kindness. A kind friend suggests, write about compelling strangers, that glint of connection illuminated in a moment, one stranger's hand gripping another's to step, mind the gap, from a brightly painted boat to the salt-stiffened grasses of an abandoned island in the Venetian lagoon. A shaft of sunlight passes over a landscape, the beauty real, then gone. Compelling, but not in the sense of those invisible strangers who design algorithms that compel me to buy a used yak wool cardigan and a pair of paisley print rubber cowboy boots on ThreadUp. Or those unjust justices who stole women's authority over their own bodies. Lucky me, I don't have a uterus, so I can't be compelled to bear young anymore. Rather, the compelling connection of strangers' kindness, how kindness intertwines with kinship. Like when I'm walking with my cane out to my writing studio, about a half mile from my house. There's a guy sitting on a ledge in front of the old elementary school, now repurposed as a professional building. His bottle in its brown paper bag sits next to him. As I pass, he says, "Can I ask you a personal question?" Then, without pause, "Are you blind?" Then tells me about his old girlfriend, a flight attendant, who got glaucoma. Then they fired her. Then he pulls up his trouser leg to show me his metal prosthetic leg and says, "Being blind, wow, that must suck. Can I give you $10? I don't take the money, but the kindness. By all means, I take the kindness." This one's called, thanks, Between. From Old English, in the space which separates, as in the space between two lines of Braille. The inability to move easily from one line to another separates me from a competent Braille reader. To me, the interstices feel vanishingly small. Line often separates poetry from prose. Line being a tool that poets often use, that prose writers mostly do not. I live in the few millimeters between lines of Braille, lost between poetry and prose, lost in the zone between total sight and total blindness. A whole country that seems invisible to other people, an unimaginable Narnia, as elusive as the space between two lines of Braille. This one's called Legal. A legal line cuts between vision and blindness. A person takes certain eye tests, and the results become a passport, making one a citizen of one country or another. Read 8 small characters on a line on a chart, and one is allowed to extend, for now, a stay in the country of sight. This makes as much sense to me as saying one side of a fish is in Mexico and the other in Texas, or shaving a clear-cut line across the 49th parallel. Ravens, smoke from forest fires, slanting rain, all cross over this border without a thought. Thanks. So a lot of the book deals with blindness and my altered sight, because obviously I see a lot. I just don't maybe see the way I did when I was 10 or the way that's considered normative in our culture. But I also spend a lot of time sort of exploring the other senses. This one's called ointment. Something a fly gets stuck in. Unguent, healing salve, meant to be soothing, a balm. In the medicine cabinet, half-used tubes wait, their emptied ends coiled like scorpion tails. A tube of toothpaste and a tube of ointment feel so similar in the hand. Colgate and Desenex feel so different in the mouth. Here's another one on the, thanks, on the sensory theme. And a lot of people ask me, well, why were you so interested in Braille? Because it wasn't exactly easy as a middle-aged person to learn it. And part of that is that I'm very grateful to live in a time when I have so much access to reading in non-visual ways. But functionally, a lot of what I end up doing is taking in information in auditory forms. And a lot of that is computer speech. So everything on my computer screen, for example, is translated into speech by a sort of Alexa type voice, but not as elegant. You know, that costs extra to have Alexa. So you have kind of a cheap, nasty, this is Sam reading you all your information. So it's really useful, but also really irritating. So Braille is super quiet. So I was really attracted to that. So this is called umami, the savory, meaty, earthy deliciousness of dashi broth, vine-ripe black crim tomato, roast chicken, porcini mushrooms, shiitake. Along with sweet, sour, bitter, and salt, one of 5 scientifically recognized tastes, identified in 1908 by the Japanese chemist Kikumi Ikeda. Braille makes up the merest fraction of my reading diet, but just as a little gob of miso, a sprinkle of fish flakes, and a thin strip of kombu seaweed can transform mere hot water into the sustenance of broth. Even a tiny dollop of Braille brings flavor to my words. My acoustic reading, by contrast, is a mere sugar rush of information. I think I'll read 2 more pieces. This one's called Yearning. And it started life as a lineated poem and then kind of snuck its way into the book as a little essay. And also my parents kind of, who've been dead many years, kind of snuck their way into this book in a way when I was revising it that I didn't expect. And so this piece is called Yearning, and it's a companion to a piece that I had written about, it's called Yahrzeit, lighting a candle for my mother. So the beginning line of this one kind of refers back to that poem. Yearning. If my mother's been dead 15 years, that means my father's been dead 20. So we can't get back that last pastrami sandwich, the one my brother and I smuggled from Manny's delicatessen after he picked me up at O'Hare on one of our mutual visits back to Chicago. Maybe 1999, 2000. We'd both moved away years before, but sometimes managed to time our visits to our ailing parents to also see each other. We can't ever feel again that exact heartburn after standing in the Manny's lunch crowd line, after shouting pastrami at the corned beef guy making him turn his bulk and knives to carve from the peppery slab, after eating both halves and the pickle and the entirely excessive latke. Watching the grease from that extra sandwich we ordered speak with a spreading mark on that white deli bag. We can get pastrami. There will be pepper, salt, and fat. There will be meat cured to the color of an heirloom rose. But we can't sit on a lakefront bench with our father in the August heat as he ate that extra sandwich, the one we hid from our mother because she wouldn't have approved of all that cholesterol. We can't get back my father eating without dropping one single cracked peppercorn, one single caraway seed, though his brain no longer told him where his feet were or his cousin's name. He still knew how to hold that gargantuan sandwich with as much feeling as a blues harp player just before letting loose the most wailing riff. He still knew my brother who clambered onto the riprap after a swim in Lake Michigan. My father offered his dripping wet son the leftover pickle, the only thing left glowing in the afternoon light.
Naomi, you have more time, and I want to encourage you to take it. So unless you really don't feel like it, think about 2 more poems or 3 more poems.
Well, let's see. I will read another one on the sensory suite called Pressure, and
Which-
then I'll finish up with the other one I was going to finish up with. Thanks
Good.
for that.
Great.
So I don't have a visual aid for you, but this piece mentions a slate, which is both the stone, but it's also the Braille slate, which is how I handwrite Braille. And this was the thing that really made me groove on Braille, was reclaiming a way of writing by hand, like keeping a journal or taking notes that I could actually read. It's basically kind of 2 hinged pieces of metal with indentations in the bottom wing and openings in the top wing. And you have a little stylus and you can poke a little dent, which you then can read as a bump. So anyway, that's a little background that wouldn't be evident from this piece. And also I want to just call out Ed Young's wonderful book, An Immense World, which is about animal perception, but about perception in general. And so a lot of the stuff in the book about the senses, that sort of the science-y, not pseudoscience, but there's a little sprinkles of science in the book, often are owed to him. So it's a wonderful kind of mind-opening read. Pressure, one aspect of the sense of touch. Others include vibration, contact, distortion, tickle, stretch, itch, ouch. All perceived through an ecosystem of specialized sensory receptors. Nociceptors collect what the central nervous system labels as pain. Thermoreceptors inform of heat and cold. Mechanoreceptors specialize in distortion and pressure. Pressure, its theme and variation allow my fingers to read Braille. Pressure, along with heat, transforms shale into slate. Pressure, too much finger pressure crushes a paper Braille dot. Using my fingernails' pressure and movement, scraping over a Braille dot is one way to erase a mistake. Most of what I create in Braille is for my brain only. Journals, journal entries, first drafts. So mostly I don't bother to open the slate, flip the paper over from writing side to reading side, and apply the pressure needed to erase an error. But I wish all my mistakes were so easy to undo. Thanks. So, okay, this really will be my last piece. It's called Yellow. Light with a wavelength of around 570 nanometers. Yellow pigments come from so many things you should not eat, like cadmium and uranium, which strangely, one form of which is called yellow cake. Genuine Naples yellow pigment was made of lead, chrome yellow, yellows from tin and rutile and benzodiazepines. Other than the honest dirt of a natural yellow ochre, all a pretty poisonous lot. Even if you could find a brilliant yet edible yellow pigment, nothing could match the yellow of those eggs Ray made me a few days after my abdominal surgery a few years ago. Propped up in my tattered orange robe, I was grateful my decayed vision spared me the details of my 5-inch incision covered with its grin of Steri-strips. Still wobbly from the youthful poison of general anesthetic, I wanted none of my usual spice, no sriracha, kimchi, or even salsa verde. I declined even black pepper. I just wanted salt and scrambled eggs, a fluffy, buttery mass on dark pumpernickel. I'm not even embarrassed to repeat the animal grunts of delight over being alive to eat that yellow cloud, to live with a man who knows how to scramble an egg, to still see enough to make out the visible yellowness of wavelength reflected back into my eyes. Yellow, hallelujah. Yellow butter in the pan. Yellow sun clearing my neighbors' houses on a winter morning. Sometimes I stare straight at it. What do I have to lose? Thank you so much.
Naomi Cohn, that is, and this is your first full-length collection, and I don't know if you actually call it a collection because it's kind of a mosaic of forms, etc. That was very cool. So Gary McDowell, let me do some little tech adjustments here. Here we go. All right. Gary McDowell's the author of 8 books, most recently A Flame on White Pine Press in 2020. His work has appeared in, among others, The Nation, American Poetry Review, Southern Review, Poetry Northwest, and New England Review. He is professor of English at Belmont University in Nashville, where he lives with his family. Gary, I am excited to hear what you've got for us.
Well, thank you. And thank you to Nina and to Al and to Naomi and to all of you in here in the Zoom and also out there in YouTube land. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'll start by reading a few poems from A Flame. Whoops, I'm on blur. This was my pandemic baby. It came out in September of 2020. So anytime I get a chance to read a few poems from it, I'm thrilled. This book centers the title of Flame, and I don't know if you can't see the cover here probably, but it's a house made of matchbooks. And so much of the book is centered around fire and light and time. When I was writing this book, I was fascinated by time as my kids grew up, and my 5-year-old daughter makes an appearance in this poem, who's now 14. So a little bit of time magic working right there. This is called Long Hunter State Park, Late Winter. No matter how fast I reach, I can't catch the orange-throated lizard climbing the shag bark. He disappeared, you. The logic my 5-year-old makes me wish this kind of magic were real. The lizard, brandishing a tiny wand, pushes me to where teleportation means she'll never age, means every day when I say, "You're up early today," and she says, "My dream ended and I had nothing else to dream." We're larger, another example of 2 bodies in orbit. Further down the path, and oak's branches like fingers lift a fir tree's skirt. A mosquito, but larger. A wristwatch fallen into the leaf mold. The shade sheds into light. Even this canopy, holy, has an end. Thanks. The Lazarus Reflex. Starlings name the sky, the skirt. They swoon and everyone fills the twilight. A stuck leaf or shoe black in the moonlight. Grief's story tells everything, and we wake the hill to climb where the starlings circle. The lovely hang of their wings of a stranger, distance in waves, as wind swings a swing set. Is it that color, the sky, exactly? Painted, turned toward, upward slightly, you are lying through your sunset. Oh, to be a fortune teller, oh, to make still. Voices, shadows, bodies, the merit of a sculpture of starlings. A locked door, faces shaped like candles, like memory hacking light, the old English word for saw blade, a snout, a thrashing river, and we remember to rejoice in fever. Cross your arms over your chest, measure the distance between the wicker chair and the landfill, and tell me, starling, that miracles never happen. Thanks. So I'm not 60 yet, but I'm in my mid 40s, and I lose things more often now than I used to. And so I looked it up because I was like, what does that mean? Should I be worried? And apparently not, because I read that by age 60, the average person loses 200,000 things. That made me feel pretty good about myself. It also prompted me to write about it. So I titled this poem, By Age 60, We Lose 200,000 Things. Our sense of duty, if we're lucky. The Greeks didn't have a word for blue, the wine dark, they called it, the sea. Our keys. Skyward toward the plains is a failure of imagination. If we can't name it, does it exist? Once upon a time, the earth was flat because we didn't know any better. Once upon a time, the most kissed face in the world. Our souls. Our souls. You can't say we didn't warn you. Cicadas every 17 years, a brood is a brood, but we all know their hard shells are murderous to beauty, impenetrable and visible as pinpricks as they spiral from the treetops to entangle your hair. Our options, spiritual error, our options. One inside another, we squeeze out of ourselves the shade caught brilliantly in the corners. Have you ever slept in an attic? The way the light both contains and illuminates, the shutters may be clasped or loosened, your rhythm, the rhythm of last year's holiday lights banging against the gutter. Our timing, how nothing once churned ever ends, how what continues, our minds, continues even when out the window darkness comes. Thanks. One final poem from A Flame. So there's a series of poems in the book that deal with the stars. I'm fascinated by the vastness of the universe. I was scrolling mindlessly on TikTok. I know, shame on me, but I was. And I came across a video of a physicist explaining the vastness. And it just, I can't handle it. It's too much to think about. But I am interested in it, and I do think about it more than I perhaps should. And so this is thinking about that, the scale of everything. And it's called The Stars and Our Response. We are roaring through the spaces between the spokes. We are the nails nailed to the sky when something like a bat swoops into view. To be there when I sit counting the leaves of clover or dancing with my wife on heart pine flooring. The only sound from the bats is how they shade the light from the moon, a language with no name. Unlike other animals, We were made to stand erect so we could gaze at the stars. We are cubes of light that equal one another. There are days when 3 dimensions are 3 too many, in those days when we are larger inside than out. All right, so on to some new poems, which is also exciting to think about. I was very fortunate to have a lot of time to work this summer. My wife had a double mastectomy at the end of May. And so I was caring for her this summer and my kids, who are teenagers and can kind of fend for themselves to some degree. But I was given a lot of time to, my wife slept and I helped her when I needed to, but I was able to write a lot. And I ended up, of course, writing about what we were going through to a large degree, but also I'm in Nashville, Tennessee, but I'm a Midwesterner through and through. And so I think about the Midwest almost always when I think about nature and outside. And I got kind of anxious for the Midwest this summer when it was 100 degrees and 92% humidity every day for months on end. And that prompted this poem. And this collection, I don't know, I think it's called We Need to Talk, but I'm not sure about that. And this poem is called Midwestern Anxiety. If winter wheat, if corn, if ravens solving puzzles. If the water is too shallow, if she's thirsty or curious, she'll add pennies, wingnuts, a bolt, anything to displace. If God, soil scientists have discovered, when healthy, sings. Melody, it seems, exists even below our feet. We come into the world beating, but we leave it silent unless we equal what we yawn. I yawn what I equal, if God. Here the ground is mostly rock, up north sand and clay, further south thick roots wet with the remnants of the sea. If the sea, if truth, if sandbags and boarded windows, God is in the details if God is anywhere at all. Anywhere at all is right here, is exactly where we last left it. Thanks. So as my wife's surgery approached, I was writing these poems that were all something pre-op, like 2 weeks pre-op, and then afterward, 24 hours post-op, 2 weeks post-op, et cetera, et cetera. And I wrote a lot of them over time as it went on. And so I'd like to read a couple of those for you. This one is simply titled 24 Hours Pre-Op. Tomorrow they'll splay you while you sleep. I'll sit and wonder, wait, think about forehead kisses and soft skin, your breath under mine. The body's secret is that it doesn't have one. Upon a table or under hand, skin knows only touch. The blade disappears into the body. Everything happens all at once, or has happened before, or already simultaneously in every permutation. Still, I'll corral you in recovery, rest your head on my chest, whisper, though neither of us will remember what I say, probably sorry, or yes, or tomorrow, but the words don't matter. The weight of you against me, what I can and cannot hold, you endure. Thanks. 2 weeks post-op. This is one of those poems where the title is part of the first line. 2 weeks post-op, and you've ripped 2 stitches clean off the sternum. The pectoral muscle spasms, and you find me hunched over the computer, grading. I've seen you birth our son, have our daughter sliced from your belly, but never have you been breathless, the air stripped from your body, and I catch you in my arms. Hours earlier, the neighbor boys, 10 and 7, a Barbie dream house. I spy them in their driveway, wander across the cul-de-sac to see what they're doing. In the bed, the bathtub, in the crib, the swing set, half a dozen bunnies, their eyes still pressed shut, their ears pinned back like a dog's when being praised. I read once that if you touch a fallen baby bird, the mother will abandon it, but it's not so with rabbits. Together, the boys and I collect the bunnies, nestle them back deep in the base of the hosta where they found them. I tell them, those babies need their mom, and they nod. We understand. In the bristle cone above the beginnings of a cardinal nest. It's the circle of logic I don't understand. I can get from point A to point B, but I can never find my way back. Thanks. And so a lot of things happened over the summer in the news. And so a lot of the times as I was writing these pre and post-op poems, I was responding to real-time things going on in the world. I write facing a window that looks at a persimmon tree in my backyard. And so the persimmon, I did one of those Wordle cloud thingies for manuscript. I'm always curious to see, like one time I wrote a manuscript of poems and my goal was to use only metaphor, no simile. And I did one of those clouds, and the most commonly used word was, as you might assume, like. So I failed miserably. But in this book, the most commonly used word was persimmon, and that made me think I was perhaps spending too much time gazing out my window. But long story short, I was trying to write these poems about domestic life, but I didn't want them to be only that. I needed to include the world outside to feel like they were grounded in a particular place and time. And so this one must have been sometime in July. It's called 7 Weeks Post-Op in a Failed Assassination. Ahead of us, a year of fire. Behind us, a year of flooding. Everything is always backward here. We celebrate before we've won, grieve before we've lost. Your wound is healing, but slowly. Our country's the opposite. It's forever an inch or a mile away. There's too much sun to think about anything else, and you spent 7 weeks in a recliner, T-Rex armed, unable to drive, shower, dress yourself. I think about the mussels we saw in the Gulf last summer, barnacled to the pier. Clasped shut, they warrant little attention, but open, a salty bite worth the work to achieve. In our garage, a box of boxes, which if broken down can be recycled. You can touch anything you want. Some things will break, some will remain the same, but others will, like water, slip through your fingers. This is the problem of time. It's already too late, even if it's early. Thank you. All right, so this is the poem that I think prompted this whole project in a way, for what it's worth, and it's titled, We Need to Talk. This morning, the rains came and went the same way, of their own accord. This morning, all of it as real as the words used to describe it. This morning, I didn't know I was a ghost, a stranger in a painting. This morning, when we're too close, this morning, when I've been stung, little earth, stung, and I tease you. This morning, coffee and Wordle. This morning, a helicopter low over the horizon, its silhouette this morning shadow. This morning, my dog's impatient whining chase 2 squirrels up the persimmon, how easily they leap to oak, to maple, to conifer, disappear this morning into this morning, the glare both sunlight and its halo this morning. This morning, under this canopy, I bend my ear to you. Thank you. I also spent a lot of time thinking about my own, as my kids are 14 and 16, and as they grow into their teenage years, and my son's driving, God help you if you live anywhere around central Tennessee. But I think about my parents a lot, and I'm very fortunate that they're both doing well up in northern Illinois, but I think about them a lot, of course. And this poem kind of came out of that thinking, called Culpability. My mother told me a house is not a home unless the sparrow song, rich with umbrella in leaves, what we cannot hear, what we cannot see, a psalm or a salve, this wind when it's humid, wind when it's frigid. An ant climbs this chair, finds once at rest, nowhere else to go without reason, is a reason. My mother told me we're all the same, men and women, black and white. Sometimes ideas mean well. Sometimes robins and jays spill the seed I put out for chickadees. Sometimes my mother told me I was special, but what she knew eventually came true. We're all one person removed from knowing everything we're not. Thank you. Two more for you. And I, again, thank you so much to all of you and to Al and to Nina for having us. This is titled For My Wife the Day After We Decide to Keep Trying. Actually, you know what? Scratch that. Let's do this. Let's end here. One more poem. I fibbed. This is titled Time is Never Lost. There are deliberate ways we sabotage ourselves, and there's trust. A bullet dropped from shoulder height will hit the ground at the same time as one fired straight ahead. They call this science. They call this, oh look, the lawn is dormant, green still where the sun pities it, where the bunnies huddle, motionless except the twitch of their whiskers. The dogs watch them through the slider. My mother's lips pressed to my forehead, the entire neighborhood outside my bedroom window. Dreams aren't reality, but I'll be damned if so much of life isn't simply getting it over with. I ask my wife, if I die, will you still make the bed every morning? If I die, cover me in sand, then soil, plant on top of me something that reaches toward what I couldn't. Permanent, answers to questions unasked, breathless, but for breath. Thank you all.
Well, wow. That is definitely giving me a lot to chew on. What do you think, Al? I think you're muted.
Yes, I'm muted.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you both. Powerful readings.
I want to urge people on Zoom, but also in YouTube to take the encouragement to make a donation so we can pay our features. Consider us passing the hat. There's a link in the chat on Zoom and also in YouTube to so that you can just kind of click on it and give what, well, you couldn't possibly give what it's worth because it just is something, poetry is just something so ineffable. So there that is. And there are those links to websites or books or whatever, and we'll talk about that in a moment. As soon as I figure out how to pin the two features and myself so that we're all hanging out together on this screen. You all have no idea how amazed I am that I've been able to accomplish this so far. I just heard something that makes me worry, but so far it looks right. And so both of you unmute yourself and we're just going to have a conversation. So as I said, I'd like to start by asking you both to say something about Rose Metal Press. And then I'm going to ask you how you think your work dovetails with or is a good fit with their mission.
So for me, the Rose Metal Press Field Guide to Flash Fiction came out in like 2007 or something around there. And my friend Dan Resnick and I, who's also a poet and a phenomenal one at that, we were both in Ohio at the time. I was finishing my MFA and he was already done. And we were both big fans and proponents of and writers of prose poetry. And so we thought, well, let's put together a proposal for a book called the Rose Metal Press Field Guide to Prose Poetry as like a sister edition to the flash fiction one. Long story short, we wrote that. We solicited a bunch of work and we approached the editors of Rose Metal, Abigail and Kathleen, and they were enthusiastic. And a couple of years later, the book was a thing. And they're phenomenal. They're absolutely incredible. I'm sure Naomi can speak to that, but they're both amazing and they do such good work. Their books are beautiful and they really are out there in the literary world being citizens, and it's a fabulous thing. So that was my story.
Yeah.
So you came up with this idea for an anthology and you had Rose Metal Press in mind specifically when you made the proposal?
Yeah, well, ironically, Dan and I had talked about it a year or so beforehand and thought that'd be a cool thing to do. There's really no book like that. And then life got in the way and we did other things. And then that flash fiction book came out and we're like, hey, wait a minute. This might be an opportunity for us to email them and see if they're interested. So we emailed them and they said, yeah, if you can make a proposal, we'll be happy to look at it. And then we did. So, yeah, I mean, we kind of made the book for them in a way once we had their blessing to send along a proposal.
Great.
Yeah. So piggybacking on that, the Rose Metal, Gary's book, The Field Guide to Prose Poetry, was that, and the Field Guide to Flash Nonfiction were kind of like made me feel like, oh, there is a home for me. Not that I at that point thought like, oh, I'm going to get published by Rose Metal, but I started life as my writing life as a fiction writer, and then kind of moved into poetry, and I loved poetry. But I always felt like a little itchy or baggy or somehow like too much. And so the prose poetry universe was like, oh, this feels like home. Like it's weird in the ways I'm weird. And so that was really wonderful. And I remember reading that Field Guide to Creative Nonfiction and reading it's a wonderful book with sort of like there's a yes, thanks for holding it. It's one of the things that's wonderful about the field guides is that they both have like craft essays, but there's also like, here, try this. And so there was a piece that looked by Leah Purpura, who I had not heard of at that time. And I don't actually even remember the name of the piece, but I just remember reading a piece. It's about a dead goldfinch. And I just was like so blown away that like you could do that. So that was my introduction to Rose Metal, was like that they collected these writers who just didn't feel boxed in to me. So anyway, that might be enough.
You said something about feeling like your work was too much. What was it? What is it about your work that's too much?
Well, I feel very lucky to be in a longtime poetry group, and like I have some chops as a poet, but yeah, there's always just like, oh, there's another thing I want to say, or I want to like run this sentence on for a few more pages, and yet I'm not a good like plot, narrative, linear thinking person exactly in my writing, so. So it's not like, oh, I just need to go into like writing novels or long memoirs. Like that's too logical and linear. So finding this community in print of the places that are just that, might be a little more than a haiku, but yeah. Or another way I think of it is that like it's kind of the space to lean into the stuff that gets criticized. Like, not that I only want to write into the stuff that I'm bad at, but that like sometimes finding what people in a strict genre setting, like in a very poety, lyric poet land, kind of might say, oh, that's too much, or it's too direct, or in very strict prose land where they might be like, that's too illogical and nonlinear. That leaning into those places that get critiqued is sometimes where interesting work happens. And I think Rose Metal, that's not their only definition of hybrid, but I think they really embrace that weirdness.
Gary, you were about to say something and I cut you off, I think. I have no doubt it was going to be really significant. It may have been something that you were going to respond to Naomi or ask her a question, or
I don't think so. I think I was just agreeing with her so much that I think I identify somewhat similarly. I mean, I was trained, so to speak, or studied to be a poet, but I wanted to be a novelist so badly. And I took a creative writing class, and the teacher's like, "Have you ever thought about being a poet?" Because one of the stories, 12 pages of me describing the slant of light through the windows, But so I think I was just nodding in agreement. That's all.
so when you wanted to write fiction and the teacher, your professor said something like, I think you should write poetry, is something that nobody has ever heard except you did. Of course, I think that some of the best prose does sound like poetry.
Yeah, for sure.
There's something too about that I'm getting about the work you both have shared tonight that feels somehow connected in some way. Do either of you feel that, or did you feel a resonance as you were listening to the other person?
Definitely. Well, I think there's a formal, that's not quite the right word. I mean, partly I just was like, wow, I just read this piece about being the recipient of the surgery of, a female surgery, and then hearing, I so responded to your writing about it as the partner, because I don't want to say that's harder, but it's a really hard space to watch somebody go through a thing. Like, I was on the drugs, right? So like, like, so anyway, I thought there was a very interesting, unexpected parallel there. But also in terms of that space of writing that just tries to be its best self and isn't that concerned with. So I don't write out between form to be tricksy wixy. It's that the thing needs to be what it needs to be. And so I definitely got that from your work, Gary, that, it's very lyrical, but it's also like, here's the thing that needs to be said that I need to say. I don't know. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but.
No, that I'll take those words in my mouth anytime. Yeah. And I think, first I thought the connections, I think we're both writing through the body. I mean, it's a struggle sometimes, I think, for poets. And as a teacher, I guess I'm looking at this from that lens, but it's hard to remember that we have five senses sometimes, and we get focused on the one or two that we are particularly adept at.
Mm-hmm.
What I really love about your work is that you're, by choice and not, focused on trying to like take in all, like everything through all the senses. And I really respond to that in your work. So that's something that I admire a lot and find difficult to do period. To do well is just a whole nother story. So yeah, it was great to see us matched up.
Yeah. It was.
A couple of things. One, I have a friend who is a prose writer who is blind. And when I first met her at a writing week in Esalen, overlooking the Pacific, I was just really struck by the images, the non-visual images that she used. And it just really kind of woke me up, and it to the fact that there are other ways of perceiving the world. I don't know why it is that it seems like people's almost default way of experiencing the world is with the eyes. And I say that as a musician. Still, I think when you listen to, or when you look at people's imagery, it's usually visual imagery. And I think that there is some way, obviously, that's something that you have had some experience with, Naomi, or been mindful of.
Yeah, so I mean there's a lot. I mean, it's cultural, right? We're a very visual culture, but it's also biological. It's like a lot of our brain space is allocated, if we're normatively sighted, to visual imagery. And visual imagery is super cool, right? Like I'm not dissing it at all. Um, but yeah, we're a very vision dominant culture and also tend to be vision dominant beings. And I guess I would say in my own writing, I think I struggled, like as I started to lose my sight, I like leaned into writing about the other senses, but I think I was like ashamed or embarrassed to write visual imagery. And I think out of my own sighted ableist confusion, like, oh, they would be imperfect visual images, or they would be wrong, or that like somehow that would confuse people. So anyway, in the book, I play a lot with describing my visual. So it's by describing the other four senses, or five or six, or however many there are. It's not like I give up writing about the visual.
But as you were saying, it kind of has strengthened for you your experience of non-visual senses, right? And it's I was going to say you're almost making a case for it, but maybe more representing it for us.
Yeah, I mean, I used to be a grant writer and a fundraiser. So like a lot of my first training in writing was as sort of advocacy and rhetorical persuasion. So I actually really try very hard not to do that in my writing, because I feel like it's a vice to tell people how to think or feel about stuff. Like it's a vice I'm trying to recover from. So, but it slips in once in a while. There's always, it's a hard habit to break.
Kind of writing poetry like a fundraiser.
Well, persuasive writing, right?
I was just kind of playing with you a little.
There probably is a poetic form that's like the balance sheet. Yeah.
Well, that would be a great hermit crab.
It would indeed. Yeah.
And if either of you do a hermit crab on that,
I know. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I can't call it to mind, but I'm pretty sure there's some good poems written on the on tax forms. So.
Oh my Lord.
Yeah.
One thing I was thinking, and I'm going to try to articulate this. I was thinking about the kind of metaphysics that you both engage with, and somewhat in different ways, but it's there. It's not hard to experience and to hear. so for example, Gary, you're doing a lot of kind of, you put words to it, but it's that line about, it's already too late, and then something
Even
about
if it's early,
what is it?
it's already too late, even if it's early.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the A going to B and not being able to go back to A, and what was the other one? The one person removed from everything you're not. Did I get
Yeah.
it right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, those just like, okay, wait, stop. And let me pull myself out of that, because one can drown
Mm-hmm.
in those phrases, which are so pithy but are just so broad. I mean, so deep.
Mm.
And then I was thinking, you know, Naomi, you did not say the space between in quotes, which is a phrase that I hear so often that it begins to feel cliche. But when you uh, began a piece with actually defining, kind of with defining your terms, and not just kind of leaving it as, oh, I'm making this kind of woo-woo image or whatever. I mean, you've really done some tying that idea to some concrete things, like the line between blindness and not, and the line between braille lines,
Mm-hmm.
um, or between blindness and not quite. Then it becomes, for both of you, something that's much more than um, much more than what it is on the face of it. And is that something that, well, maybe even just you could elaborate on what's important to you in those things, like obviously addressing blindness and braille for you, Naomi, is important because of the experience and the knowledge of it, but it also seems to take you into a much broader place, I think. And for you, Gary, I just kind of got hit
Yeah.
in the
No.
face with all of these, remarkable, I don't know if you call them turnarounds, that,
It's sort of these
Yeah.
lines that crack my head open, like the image of like we stood upright so we could look up at the stars.
Mm-hmm.
And that that these metaphysical things are sort of nested in this, as you were talking about, very embodied sensory, talking about these experiences. And then there'll just be this inserted, there'll be this like, whoa, and then it just passes, I'm like still trying to grasp what that might mean, or
Yeah.
what you've suggested. So I loved that kind of, but then there's these little whip cracks of a much bigger world.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I mean those are the spaces I'm interested in, those interstitial spaces, like between where a thought makes sense or even exists and where like it didn't just a moment before. I'm fascinated by that. And in college I was a philosophy major for a heartbeat. But I'm neither clever nor intelligent enough at the time anyway, sure, to do it. And I'm also about as deep as a wading pool in some regards, but I love that kind of thinking. I love tautology. I love like the bullet, dropping it from a shoulder, like that, those things, like I'm really interested in that. And there's this book by James Richardson called Vectors, and he writes these like little micro, kind of like what Bob read earlier this evening for us, but they're kind of like these little micro like Zen cones almost. Like they're fascinating little things. He calls them like 10-second essays or micro memoir.
Wow.
So I'm fascinated by that, like to say the one thing that encompasses it all. And a lot of times I don't think these things. I'm writing, and I'm a big believer in Richard Hugo and this sort of idea of, first that the music is guiding you, not idea, and to leave the triggering subject behind before you run out of things to say about it. So I also like to leave the poem really early without explaining it away. And so a lot of times if something like that happens, one of those kind of metaphysical utterances happens, I'm just like, oh, like I stuck it, I think. I think
That's
right.
or at least I leave it there because I don't want to explain that away. I like the mystery of that, especially if before that I've grounded it somehow or another, which I don't know. I try to, but yeah, so that's kind of where I'm coming from. Like I want to be introspective and I want to be philosophical on the language level, but really it's the language itself that's sort of guiding it. And when those moments happen, that's where I sort of stop and go, oh, maybe that's the thing I was searching for. I had to work to get to it,
Yeah, that makes so much sense that these big kind of philosophical or metaphysical explosions, but they just grow out of organically what's happening in the poem. I think that's feels really magical.
Yeah. And even your work, Naomi, tonight, like it felt like I never really felt stable in the best of ways, right? Like I didn't know, and there were so many moments of humor, but then also moments of really introspective kind of somberness, and that is the same to me. That kind of move is similar to that tautological sort of metaphysical thing. It's like that being unsettled is my favorite place to be when I'm looking or listening or whatever, however I'm viewing or taking in art, that I want to be unsettled in the best of ways.
Yeah. So Nina, I wanted to circle back to what you were saying about the definitions, because I think that I'm glad you framed them in a way that makes them useful, because in a way they were just an artifact of the form, that like at least some of the entries felt like they needed to start in a definition. But it's also like it's a pretty weak way to start a poem. Like there's usually not a verb in sight. It's not necessarily an image. So yeah, so it was fun playing with that. But also like it's like, oh, okay, well now I have a rationale for why I did it, because I think you articulated that wasn't really what I was doing, but I'm going to steal what you said, Nina, on that.
Like one of those, well, I did that on purpose.
Right, I made that mistake on purpose. Yeah.
Actually, I don't know if my cat.
Not a mistake. It's a constraint of the form, or I found it a constraint when I honored that, trying to make it seem like it could have been some weird encyclopedia entry.
So that brings me back to this, just by the very fact of framing this collection as an encyclopedia, it really suggests that you are going to do something more comprehensive, something that maybe has more facets to it than particularly abled people would think about. And that it does take us to a deeper level, though, that goes beyond blindness per se, or or legal blindness, as you brought it up. And so where did that take you? Just the idea of, okay, I'm dealing with failing sight. I don't know if that's an ableist way of thinking about it, but there's something deeper about that to me, meaning you. I'm seeing again, you seeing a broader metaphor, something deeper. Am I right? Am I getting that right? And is there a deeper metaphor or metaphysical experience that you connect to?
I think so. I mean, I can't label it as clearly as that, but yeah, I think it is like just this um opening into something bigger. And I also I think one of the things I learned in when you sort of questioned your language or whether it was ableist or not, one of the beauties of my position in as the narrator is that I was born into the ableist soup that we're all in, right? And so I lived like so when I'm talking about sort of disability the book isn't a whole lot about disability politics, but when I'm going there, I've said and done everything that I might be pointing the finger at somebody else about. Um, so I mean, I think maybe the metaphysics of it is just the kind of the cosmic zoom. Like at some level, it seemed really annoying to just be so focused on my physiological experience. Like it's not even a memoir, it's just sort of a lot of it is just sort of these physical experiences and things I learned about this one tiny strand of my life. But there's this way in which if we go really, really close focus into our bodies and our experience, maybe we are talking about something more universal. Whereas to me, I mean, I love some traditional memoirs, but I really wasn't interested in a narrative of crap thing happens, narrative of overcoming. Like that doesn't fit my experience. Like my experience is not all positive or all negative. There are times when I'm like, wow, my life is so much better because I got to learn Braille and perceive my other senses. And there's other times when I'm like really pissed that I put Desenex in my mouth, that's gross. But so it's not like there's a linear progression from like one kind of life to another or from sadness to goodness. It's all at once. And I think that's, I don't know if universal, but when I connect to other folks' experiences, it's often that non-linear, complex gorgeousness of it.
Well, for myself, and I've lost a whole lot. I have some hearing left, and I have some really expensive hearing aids. But for me, thinking about there's a way in which it interests me. Not only do I'm too old and too hearing to enter into the world of those who are capital D deaf. I'm not prepared I think I'm too old to learn a new language. But there is something that's interesting to me, and to think about senses and to think about how people experience the world differently and how I experienced the world differently or experienced it differently when I was hearing fully. And now that I just struggle.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
both the kind of Buddhist curiosity and the frustration simultaneously.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I don't, I think we took this way into it.
Yeah, I might have
It was
driven us off
You
course a
can
little.
tell why I did that, but I do think that relates to what you're doing in your work too, Gary, and I'm sure you're relating to some of this.
Yeah, I'm thinking, and I'm fascinated by this, but I'm thinking too about something we touched on just a little while ago when Naomi was talking about how she was writing about the surgery she had, and I'm writing about the surgery my wife had. And the thing that I was thinking about a lot is what is my responsibility as partner? Like what can I voice? I'm not trying to write her experience by any stretch of the imagination. I'm writing my own experience, but that's always a question I think about too when writers of any genre write about other people, is, you know, what responsibilities do you have there? And that's why I think so many of the poems that I wrote, quote unquote, about my wife's recovery was less, they were mostly about me. And then I thought, like, that's not right. That's not right at all. But actually, I think that is right. I think that's the only purview I have, you know.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
I was thinking about the poetry of Witness, you know, that was made famous by Caroline Forche.
Right.
So you know, I remember reading about that. So anyway, that's just kind of what I was thinking as you two were chatting there.
Yeah, and I think that certainly that's how I received your poems, is that it's landed in your body as you're writing. At some level, you are writing about another person's experience, but it's centered in your experience of that experience. So yeah, it really resonated for me. It's and I do. I think it's you at least, I assume, get to ask your spouse, like, think about this poem.
Yeah.
But I really resonate with that question. I have a longtime friend who died a few years ago and wanted to write about our 50 years of friendship. And I can't ask her, like, are you okay with me talking? She had different disabilities, but we had a shared shared experiences, but also very different ways of writing about it, or sharing it or not sharing it out in the world. So it's like, wow, how do I write about that in a way that feels okay when I can't be like, are you cool with this? So
yeah, I wrote a lot about my stepfather in my book of essays, and he passed when I was 16 years old, of glioblastoma, a brain tumor. And I was torn as I was writing those essays. I was like, do I call my mom and like ask all the little details that I don't remember? Because I was 16, you know.
Yeah.
And so I didn't. I wrote the essays without it and then show them to her. And she's like, that's not how that happened. I'm like, yeah, but that's how I remember it happening. And so that goes down this whole other path of, you know, truth versus honesty versus, you know, so yeah, it's a
subjective experience.
Of course, that too. Yeah, sure.
Well, you know, and then I mean, there's that mirror between witness and experience, that the witness has their own experience, and we are enriched by seeing both parts of that. Because if, for example, Naomi, you present to your audience the experience of losing sight, we are all witnesses. You know, we are not able to get into your skin, your experience, or whatever. We can only experience it as witnesses, kind of like you, Gary, with your wife. I do want to say, because it's just about 9 o'clock, I want to say that when you guys come into Chicago next, let's make a plan, because I want to continue this conversation for reals. You know, this has been wonderful. And okay, now I am going to unpin us all so that we're back with everybody. And remove pin. I can't believe I'm actually able to do this. But I can't see how to unpin myself. That's not good.
I don't know, Nina, if you saw Bob's comment. He complimented you on managing the tech very well tonight.
Thank you very much.
very graciously, yeah.
Well, good. So I'm going to fail at the last minute. I should be able to do this, but no. Maybe what I'll do is just pull you back in so we're both pinned. And I do want to say, when I was stumbling around about Bob Chico, you know, I was gonna comment at the end of your reading. it was because the kind of things that you write really kind of dovetail with Rose Metal Press and with the kinds of work we've been hearing. And I think it was Gary that mentioned that. And yeah, perfect fit. So Al.
Well, what else? There's not much else to say except to thank everybody for tonight. It was a really fun way to end this 2024 year of Molly's. So thank you, Gary, and thank you, Naomi, and all the open micers. We had a good evening of poetry. It's always inspiring and comforting to have some good poems read alive.
Right. Thank you.
Aloha, everybody. Bye-bye.